one of the key facets of why we're slightly different to other graphite companies is that we have extremely strong relationships with off-takers on the downstream side. So we have 90% of our product is currently under binding off-take agreements.
Hello and welcome to the Assay TV. Today I'm here with George Donne, Chief Executive Officer at Evolution Energy Minerals. So George, thanks for joining us here at 121 Cape Town.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. And maybe we can start off this interview with just a bit of a background into Evolution Energy Minerals and your projects.
Certainly. So Evolution Energy Minerals, we're a publicly listed company. We're traded on the ASX under the ticker EV1. Our flagship project is the Chilalo natural coarse flake graphite project in southern Tanzania. Chilalo has been in development for a number of years. We've now have an updated feasibility study. We are fully permitted. We have our mining license under our framework agreement with the government. What we're trying to do at the moment is, having started recent works, we're looking to get through to an investment decision this year. And one of the key facets of why we're slightly different to other graphite companies is that we have extremely strong relationships with off-takers on the downstream side. So we have 90% of our product is currently under binding off-take agreement with YXGC, who are one of the largest producers of specialist high-margin graphite products. They take our coarse flakes, so that's about 55% of our product. And then another 35% of our product is the fines, and they go to a company called BTR. BTR are the largest battery anode facility companies in the world. So they have about 20 to 30% of global market share for lithium-ion anode materials. And not only are they an offtake partner of ours, but they are an investor. And we are the only company that BTR has invested in the graphite space globally.
So you've also recently been appointed CEO of the company back in November of last year. So can you give us a bit of your own personal background?
Sure. So I've worked in mining finance for about 25 years. So I started off in JP Morgan's mining and metals investment banking team in London and Johannesburg. We're working specifically on M&A and corporate financing. And then I moved on to the industry side. I've worked with a number of small cap mining companies. I've had exposure into private equity, investment and advisory. And prior to joining Evolution, I was Director of Corporate Development with Eurasian Resources Group. They're a private multinational mining conglomerate, and they're the fourth largest producer of cobalt in the world out of their operations in the DRC. So I've got very well-rounded exposure into battery materials in particular, and specifically in mining finance.
Yeah, absolutely. And so looking at Evolution's news flow, you've recently commenced the ECL for the process plant at your Chilalo project. So can you talk a little bit about some of the interest that you've received for this, and what does it mean for the project moving forward?
Sure. So the ECI process is part of the process to get us to an EPC decision. So the early contractor involvement process is that we are now at a point where, having started our initial early site works, we've gone out to tender to a number of major international engineering firms and basically invited them to come in, and as part of the process of getting to that final EPC, they bid on what a structure and what a financing terms are of arranging an EPC, but they actually work with us as clients to do all the final drawings, to do the final designs, to do the final costings, so that our intention is to shortlist from the very strong responses that we got from a large number of engineering firms, shortlist them down to 2 or 3 to work with over the next few months. And then at the end of that process, you'll have a finalized EPC, which has been really tailored to exactly what you're doing in the ground with a company that you've been working with for a number of months. You've really got to understand them and how they're operating. And at that point, what my CEO, John Nolan, wants is that he will have an EPC contract, and we're aiming for that in the second half of this year.
Okay, well, we'll definitely have to catch back up with you then once that happens. So back in October, Evolution also identified a copper, lead, zinc, VHMS style prospect. So what are some of your exploration plans that you have in place for this?
We do. We're very excited to be able to announce our Jakundu discovery. So within our licenses, there were some old artisanal workings that had exposed some clearly copper-bearing mineralization there. So we started off just doing some basic site sampling, just some soil work. They've indicated some very good responses, and we believe it has all the hallmarks of a volcanic hosted massive sulfide for copper, lead, zinc. And it just demonstrates how prospective our area is. Obviously, we're very focused on Chilalo, and Chilalo is a graphite project. But here we have something that gives us a broader exposure to other battery materials, and it's that real sort of extra excitement of having a bit of exploration again. And so we're hoping to update the market on that in the coming weeks in terms of how that survey sampling has been going.
Okay, sounds great. With your exposure to both graphite and the other battery metals, how do you feel that Evolution is exposed to the whole battery value chain?
We are predominantly a graphite company. That's what we're really focused on. And when people look at the graphite space, it's quite hard to sort of see how they get rolled out in terms of the commercial strategy aspect. And it's a process whereby, because you're making commodities for a specific buyer, you need to be part of that process, that offtake process. You can't just make a material and then try and find a buyer to sell it. You are making something to order. So with the work that we've done with YXGC on our Coarse Flake product that goes into expanded graphite materials, that process has been ongoing for 10 years. They know our product. It's some of the best in the world in terms of what they can get for graphite. This is what they have told us. And they know that our material works well for what they need to produce. And exactly the same with BTR. BTR are supplying Panasonic, Tesla, SK, CATL. These are companies that need to know how BTR's material will work for them. They need to know how our material will work in their process. So you cannot be a supplier in their supply chain unless they have taken your material, sampled it, produced material with it. And that's something that we've done. And we've been working with BTR for a number of years. As I said, they are an investor of ours. So, we are very much focused on Chilalo. But with the recent discovery of Chukunda, suddenly we have this element here where maybe there's a broader exposure, and how we look to unlock the value of Chukunda and maybe other minerals that we find out on our licenses. That's something that we're looking forward to addressing during the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's quite interesting. You talk about all the work that you've done with the off-taker and their clients as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the role that you see this whole value chain for graphite and other commodities kind of developing?
Sure. Graphite, I've worked a little bit previously in cathode materials, and you have lots of different variations and lots of different formulations for cathode materials. And there's big changes in terms of are nickel and cobalt still going to have as big a future as they were? Is it now going to be LFP in different styles of cathode? Anodes are still very much dominated by graphite. There are two different forms of graphite. There's synthetic and there's natural. Obviously, being a flake producer, we cater to the natural side of it. But the actual anode manufacturers themselves, companies like BTR, will stress that it's not an either-or situation. Their customers want both. For them, the combination of these materials is what is critically important. And synthetic offers benefits related to reliability, related to scale, but natural offers benefits in terms of far superior carbon footprint. It is cheaper, but you do get variations because you're dealing with a natural ore body that will have variations. So there is absolutely a role for both. The demand in terms of EV consumption and in terms of anode supply is going to be such that the natural flake graphite market is going to have to expand very considerably in the coming years. But in terms of the positioning of the anode in the battery, graphite is by far and away the dominant material. So we don't see the threats and concerns related to changes on the cathode side. That doesn't affect us.
Right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. A couple years ago, graphite was really starting to kind of come up into most of the discussions. So just to start to round things out, can we talk about financing? So, how are you positioned for the coming months?
Sure. The big challenge for us is that we want to be at FID during this year. That is going to require us to put together a full funding package. And where we are at the moment with the market sentiment, it is difficult being a graphite developer at this point. There isn't a lot of real desire in the graphite market. We've had some bad news coming out of some of the major players. So we're looking at addressing it in terms of we need to basically have the funding in place to get through to our FID scenario, and then look at what options we have related to putting the full funding package in place. We have commercial banks who are interested in funding 50-odd% of the project. We have a couple of key institutions who have been with us from the very beginning, and these are big funds who finance through the construction sector. One of our largest shareholders is BTR. They took that strategic position because they want to see this project get into construction. And then we have to look at what is the optimal way of structuring a funding package so it is not overly dilutive to our shareholder base, and so we can sustain the positive momentum that we're expecting as we start to bring the project forward to FID.
Sounds great. And just to wrap it up, any big milestones that you want to highlight for us?
So we're hoping to update the market soon, obviously in Chikundu, and that's very exciting. We've been doing some work also with some of the easterly resources that we had. So we had some drilling on a mineralization for graphite that we had not too far away from where our existing resources are. We need to bring that into a resource, but we see big optimization opportunities there due to its shallow nature, as opposed to some of the deeper material we have in the FS at the moment. And then obviously as the ECI process continues and we start to get through to EPC, we're very keen to keep the market updated as to how we go. And we're also working on some other facets which are not quite really ready to bring to market yet, but it's public that we have an MOU with BTR related to a downstream anode facility. We'd spent a lot of time focusing on the US market for that. Now we're sort of looking at broadening that focus outside of China, outside of the US, and we're having a number of very encouraging discussions related to potential downstream joint venture work with BTR and potentially with other third parties. And it would be lovely to be updated the market before the end of the first half of this year with some of those discussions and how they're going.
Sounds great. Well, we'll definitely have to catch up again. But either way, George, thanks for joining us at Cape Town this year.
Thank you very much. Thank you.